Hey, how are you guys doing? It's time to read The Land of Stories and finish it. And oh my goodness, Grandma just appeared. I cannot wait to read this chapter. But I want to show you a couple things before we start. We're going to read another book when this is over. So we're going to read How Tia Lola Came to Visit. Stay. So this is by one of my favorite authors, Julia Alvarez. So I'm super excited. Miss Anita and I will take turns reading back and forth. And then when we finish this one, we're going to do something a little different. So listen to the whole thing with us so that then, depending on where we are in this world that has COVID-19, we will either do it in person, come hang out and talk about this book and get to know other kids who love books, or we'll do it through Zoom. Hopefully we'll do it in person. But if we have to, we'll do it through Zoom. All right. So The Land of Stories. Chapter 24, A Fairy's Tale. I need to know, do you remember what happened at the end of chapter 23? So remember the twins were called to see the fairy godmother? They thought they were in trouble. And so this is how it ended. The fairy godmother turned to face the children. She was a beautiful older woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. Her hair was the light brown and was worn up in a gorgeous hairdo. The twins froze. Grandma? Alex gasped. All right, chapter 24, A Fairy's Tale. I'm so glad you're all right, their grandmother said and rushed over to the twins. She gave them the biggest and longest hug they had ever received from her. Your mother and I have been so worried. The twins didn't hug her back. They couldn't. They could barely breathe. They were surprised they were still standing because neither of them could feel their legs. How are you there, Grandma asked. Are you hurt? Are you hungry? Do you need anything? Grandma, Alex asked softly, is it really you? It's me, sweetheart, she said. I'm really here. You're the fairy godmother? Connor asked. She smiled at them. I am, she said, with sadness in her voice. I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way. Their grandmother stopped speaking. Her gaze had landed on the object Alex was holding. Good heavens, what on earth are you doing with your father's old journal? She asked. Alex and Connor felt like they had swallowed their own hearts. This is Dad's journal? Alex asked with big, bewildered eyes. We've been following Dad's journal this whole time, Connor asked. I think I'm going to faint, Alex said. Their grandmother pulled out a long crystal wand from inside her overcoat. She waved it, and a sofa magically appeared in the clock tower. She took the twins by the hands and set them down at the sofa and let them catch their breath. It took the twins by surprise. Even though she was the fairy godmother, Alex and Connor weren't expecting their grandmother to be capable of such magic. Grandma took the journal from Alex and flipped through the pages, amazed that it had somehow found its way into their possession. Where did you get this? She asked. It was given to us by our friend, Froggy, Alex said. We've been following it since we got here. We've been hunting down all the items for the wishing spell, Connor said. The wishing spell? Their grandma asked anxiously. No wonder it was impossible to find you. You and Dad are actually from here, then? Alex asked. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't making it all up in my head. Dad wrote that journal? Connor asked, his mind still stuck on the subject. Yes, their grandmother said. It's all true. I gave this journal to him when he was a boy. I'm glad it was useful. The twins had gotten used to their heads spinning with questions, but now they were spinning out of control. They didn't know which questions to ask first. So Dad wanted the wishing spell so he could travel into our world, Connor asked. He wrote that he fell in love with a woman in our world, Alex said. Was it? Could it be? Your mother? Yes, their grandma said. Alex and Connor exchanged a look, each seeing how the other was processing the information. Neither looked less shocked than the other. How long have you been a fairy godmother? Alex asked. Why didn't anyone ever tell us this? Connor asked. I know you probably have 100 questions, their grandma said, but before you worry yourselves too much, let me explain. Please, Connor said. Their grandma took a deep breath. She didn't know where to start. We always planned on telling you when you were older, she said. Your father was counting down the days until he could bring you here and show you around. Unfortunately, he never got the chance to. After he passed away, you two were going through so much already, your mother and I didn't want to overwhelm you, so we decided to hold off. So Mom knows about this place? Alex asked. She's never been here, but she knows enough, their grandma said. Your father and I, on the other hand, were born and raised in this world. Before your father was born, and when I was just a young fairy in training, I accidentally discovered your world. So your cabin in the woods, your blue car, it was all just for show? Certainly not, Grandma said. I stay at that cabin during my travels, and I love the blue car. I wish people in this world knew about automobiles. So how did you end up in our world to begin with? Alex asked. It happened by total accident, she said. I had recently just finished a tour of the kingdoms, traveling to those who needed a helping hand, and I was anxious to help more. I waved my wand around me. I closed my eyes and thought with all my heart, I wish to go someplace where people need me the most, thinking I would just end up in a small village in the northern kingdom. When I opened my eyes, I knew I wasn't in the kingdom anymore. I kept it to myself for years before telling any of the other fairies about it. I met a group of children there who showed me around. I was fascinated by their world, but they were even more fascinated with stories about mine. They didn't know anything about magic or fairies before I came along. Their world was so consumed with war and famine and disease, it was all they knew. They would sit for hours and listen to my stories about the world I came from. It seemed to take them away from all their troubles. I saw how the stories inspired them, how they gave them hope, how they gave them courage and strength, and how they learned lessons from them. It made children without families learn to love and trust a little more than they had before. And it put the sparkle back in the eyes of the children who were ill and had their childhoods taken from them. I decided from then on I would do as much as I could to make our stories, our history, as known as possible. To date, I'm the only one who has had the gift to move between worlds, and I found it to be a great responsibility. I recruited Mother Goose and a few other of the fairies to go with me into your world and spread these stories of ours. We found the children who needed to hear them the most. The ones who were down on their luck and needed a little magic, and the term fairy tales was born. Your world was moving so fast and growing so large we couldn't do it by ourselves anymore, so we asked people like the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen and a few others to help us over the years. So there is a time difference, Alex said. Your world moves so much faster than ours, Grandma said. I visited once a week, and every time I returned it seemed as if decades and decades had gone by. That's why the stories have been in our world for so long, Connor said. Oh no, Alex exclaimed. Mom, does that mean she's grown into an old woman while we've been here? No, their grandmother said. You see, children, there was a time difference, but then something truly magical happened that changed all of that. What? Connor asked. You two were born, Grandma said with a smile. The twins looked at each other amazed. Why are we so special? Connor asked. Because sometimes magic has a mind of its own, she said. Grandma looked down at her hands and at her wedding ring. Your grandfather loved your world and traveled with me whenever I went. He was the love of my life, but unfortunately died shortly before your father was born. I raised your father here on my own, but I continued to visit the other world from time to time, although it was painful because it reminded me of your grandfather. Your father was always an adventurous boy. From an early age, he was constantly running off and exploring different lands throughout the kingdoms. He was always very curious about the other world. I promised to take him one day when he was an adult. Many years later, he came with us to a children's hospital to read stories to the sick children. Your mother had just started nursing there, and I knew from the minute he laid eyes on her that his heart didn't belong to himself anymore. Naturally, I forbid him from staying or ever coming back with the fairies and myself again. It was selfish of me, but I was scared he would get lost in the time difference of the worlds and would live the rest of his life without me. I couldn't lose my son after losing your grandfather, but his love for your mother was too strong, and he found his own way back by using the wishing spell. I had no choice but to give him my blessing and let him go. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do as a mother. However, as soon as you two were born, the most peculiar thing happened. Your world and this world slowly started to move at similar speeds. It's the greatest magic I've ever seen in my lifetime. Being your father's children means that you have part of this world inside you. You always have. You two are the first children of both worlds. You're the bridge that connects them. The twins were so relieved to know that their mother would be the same age when they returned. You mean? Alex began to ask, but paused because it almost seemed too good to be true, that Connor and I are part fairy? I suppose, if you want to put it that way, she said. Connor placed both of her hands over her heart, and tears came to her eyes. Connor rolled his eyes and sighed. That's wonderful, Alex said. Oh, great, Connor said sarcastically. The guys at school can never hear about this. How else did you think you set off my old storybook? Grandma said. Alex sat straight up in her seat. She remembered the night in bed when she was holding the Land of Stories and wishing with all her heart to travel inside it. The first night she discovered it wasn't an average book. You mean I did that? She asked. I made the Land of Stories bring us here? Yes, Grandma said. A proud smile filled her face. Alex couldn't believe it. She was magic. She'd made it happen. It all makes so much sense now, Alex said. In the castle the evil queen was hiding in, my tear activated the wishing spell, and I saw my reflection in one of her magic mirrors. I had wings. Thought I was just seeing things. Evil queen? Their grandma asked. Sounds like you two have had even more of an adventure here than I thought. You can say that again, Connor said. I look forward to hearing about it, their grandma said. Your mother has been worried sick. She's had to give your school every excuse known to man as to why you two have been gone. I think it's time I took you home. Home? She was going to take them home? Never had a word sounded so beautiful. Can you do that? Connor said. You'd be amazed at the things your grandma can do, she laughed. But her look faded as she sadly looked down at the journal that had belonged to her late son. Amazing, isn't it? Even in death, your father managed to show you around this place. It had always been his dream. Alex and Connor had always thought that their father was amazing, but until now, they never knew just how amazing he actually was. The twins and their grandmother left the clock tower and caught Sir Lambton leaning on the door, closely listening to their conversation. He escorted them back down the stairs to the ballroom. I knew your father, Lambton whispered into the twins' ears. We grew up together. I knew you must have been his children the very second I saw you. That's why I put the glass slipper in your bag. The twins couldn't even acknowledge it with a smile. Their minds were already overloaded. They walked into the ballroom and everyone stood at the side of Fairy Godmother. Everyone, please have a seat. I've come to bless the baby princess with a gift, and then I'm going to take my grandchildren home, she said, and put her arms around Alex and Connor. Grandchildren? Cinderella asked. I had no idea why that practically makes us family, she said, smiling at the twins. Did you hear that, Alex? Connor said, leaning close to his sister. Cinderella herself just said, we're practically her family. I know, Alex peeped, and I'm trying not to cry. The fairy godmother took the newborn princess into her arms. The twins were excited to see their grandmother in action. She's beautiful, dear, she said to Cinderella. My gift to the princess will be bravery. She may need it in the years to come. The fairy godmother kissed the newborn's cheek. Her lips left a sparkly mark on the infant's face, and it slowly faded away as the gift was absorbed. Before I go, I have one more gift to give, the fairy godmother said, and took out her long crystal wand. Will the gentleman known as Froggy please come to the front of the room? Froggy, who had been partially hiding behind the charming kings, cautiously met the fairy godmother in the middle of the room. Thank you so much for looking out for my grandchildren, the twins' grandmother said. I will never be able to thank you enough, but for now I'd like to take away the curse put upon you. Froggy's mouth opened extra wide. He kept looking back and forth between the twins and the fairy godmother. I, he started, but couldn't finish. The fairy godmother waved her wand, and the curse cast upon him blew away like dandelion seeds in the wind. Froggy wasn't Froggy anymore. He was a man. He was a very attractive man, too, with dark hair and eyes that illuminated the entire room. It was shocking for the twins to see him as anything else. Charlie? King Chance said. Is that you? The charming brothers all leaned closer to him. They stared at him as if they were looking at a ghost. Hello, brother, Froggy said. It's been a long time. The charming's amazement eventually wore off and turned into celebration. They ran over to their long-lost brother and vigorously embraced him. The room erupted with joy at the long-overdue reunion. Red Riding Hood was quietly blushing to herself. She was looking at Prince Charlie in a completely new way. He wasn't the friendly frog man who saved her in the collapsing castle anymore. He was husband material. "We thought you were dead," Chandler said, rubbing his brother's head. "We searched every kingdom for you," Chase said, patting him on the back. "Now you know why you couldn't find me," Charlie said and shrugged. "Why didn't you tell us?" Chance asked. "I was ashamed," Charlie said. "I didn't know any better. I thought I had to hide. Please forgive me." The twins couldn't believe it. They knew why he had been acting so strange when they'd arrived. "So you're a prince?" Alex asked with a gigantic smile on her face. "You forgot to mention that part." "My apologies," Charlie said. "I could have sworn I mentioned it over lily pad tea." They laughed together. Charlie ran over to the twins and hugged them almost as tightly as his brothers had just hugged him. "Thank you," Charlie said, "for inspiring me to come out of the hole in the ground." "Thank you," Alex said. "I'm still calling you Froggy," Connor said. The fairy godmother waved her crystal wand one last time, and the door appeared in the middle of the ballroom. She walked over to the twins and placed a hand on both of their shoulders. "It's time," she said. The twins recognized the door immediately. It was the front door of their rental house. They had never been so happy to see it. The light was shining through it. They knew their mother was waiting for them on the other side. All the kings, queens, and fairies in the room looked at Alex and Connor sweetly. Although most of them had predicaments with the twins, they were sad to see them go. "Say goodbye," Grandma told the twins. Connor couldn't wait any longer and ran straight to the door. "Bye!" Connor yelled at everyone in the room without looking at them. He ran through the door and disappeared, home at last. Alex looked up at her grandmother. "Will we ever come back?" she asked, hoping with all her heart for the answer she wanted to hear. "Someday," her grandma said. Alex took a step toward the men and women she had grown up reading about her entire life. She could have sworn she had had a dream just like this once. She had been meaning to say something and decided this might be her last chance to say it. "I know this may not make any sense, but thank you for always being there for me," Alex said. "You're the best friends I've ever had." They didn't quite understand what she meant, but they were all very touched by her words. "Come along, dear," her grandma said, and escorted her to the door. Alex wiped away the tears that had been brought on by saying farewell. She couldn't help but smile as she walked through the door with her grandmother, though because she knew in her heart it wasn't really goodbye. Well, I love when a book ends so happily. I love how it ends for Froggy. So remember we looked at this cover when we started and we noticed there was a frog. There's this wolf. We got to know the wolf pack pretty well, didn't we? And we saw Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and the fairies and the glass slipper. So that was such a great read. So what I want you to know is we have more of the Land of Stories at the library. So number 2 is this one, The Enchantress Returns. So if you'd like to come check it out and read it to yourself or have one of your parents read it to you, that would probably be awesome. So I'm just going to show you some things I notice. I see thorns around the outside. I'm not sure. Some green individual that looks strange. Maybe a snow queen, snowflakes. The harp. The wheel thingy-McBobber. I see Froggy. Well, that's weird, because Froggy just became a man. And a polar bear with red eyes. I get scared when I see polar bears with red eyes. And then in the back. So let's see what this one is about, just in case you're interested. The Land of Stories is no longer the joyful world Alex and Connor Bailey remember from their wishing spell adventure. The evil enchantress who cursed Sleeping Beauty is back with a vengeance, and the fairy tale world lives in fear. When the Enchantress's evil reach extends even to Alex and Connor's world, and their mother is kidnapped, they must defy their grandmother's orders and find their own way into the Land of Stories to rescue her. With a little help from a reluctant Queen Red Riding Hood, the swashbuckling outlaws Goldilocks and Jack, and their old amphibian friend Froggy, can Alex and Connor save their mother and the fairy tale world from the greatest threat it's ever faced? And then the back says, Sleeping Beauty was just about to call for help when a blinding flash of violet light filled the forest. The queen screamed and fell to the ground, covering her face, but the flash lasted only a second. She smelled smoke and got to her feet and looked around. The entire forest was ablaze, and every tree had been turned into a spinning wheel. Oh, the spinning wheel was right there. There was no denying it now. The kingdom's greatest fear had come true. The Enchantress, Sleeping Beauty whispered to herself. She's back. So, this one looks good. You might want to come check it out. Or I may sit and read it in my office and not do any work. I don't know. Got two choices. Okay, don't forget to watch out for this and watch out for information on our book club to go with How Tia Came to Stay. How Tia Lola Came to Stay by Julia Alvarez. You guys have a great day.